Good morning, everyone. I'm the Reverend William Levwood. My pronouns are he and him, and I'm the minister here at Accotink Unitarian Universalist Church. As we begin our service, if you're in person, I remind you to silence your phones. If you're online at home, shut your other windows. Take a deep breath and center yourself for worship. We open in welcome to the ancestral people of this land, acknowledging that our church, like all of Burke, rests on the unceded territory of the Manahoac tribe of the Great Sioux Nation. We seek healing and the realization of justice with the people of this land who live on in their descendants, the present-day members of the Monacan Indian Nation, the Patawomac Indian Tribe of Virginia, and the Piscataway Indian Nation. We honor the ancestors as we move toward healing, so that all together shall one day know full justice. Our chalice lighting words this morning are from Zen teacher Thich Nhat Hanh. People usually consider walking on water or in thin air a miracle. But I think the real miracle is not to walk either on water or in thin air, but to walk on earth. Every day we are engaged in a miracle which we don't even recognize. A blue sky, white clouds, green leaves, the black, curious eyes of a child, our own two eyes, all is a miracle.
I'm Paulette Lickman-Panzer, and now that the Rev has reminded me to use this mic, this is a welcoming and inclusive congregation, and this is actually the reason that my husband Stan and I have come to Accotink for about 35 years, because it is a community. It's a community whether people are gathered here or they're at home having a first or second or maybe third cup of coffee this morning. I put my name tag on today, so I remind all of you when you are here to put yours on. And if you're at home and you need a name tag, you can put in the chat that you need one, and whoever's taking care of that will help you out. Whether you're a longtime person, I see several of you out there, or whether you're somebody that I just met a couple of months ago in a covenant group, or perhaps somebody here today that I'll be meeting for the first time, we welcome you and we're glad that you came here today.
Our time for all ages is interactive this morning, so get your glass Pebbles out. This is from Thich Nhat Hanh as well, from a book called A Handful of Quiet. He calls this the Four Pebbles meditation. So first, take out the red pebble, or you can take them all out and just hold the red pebble in your dominant hand. This red pebble represents a flower and the freshness that a flower symbolizes. You can see we're going to go through all four of these pebbles throughout this meditation. So the first one is the flower. So hold that pebble in your hand and breathe in flower and breathe out freshness. Breathe in flower, breathe out beginner's mind. Breathe in flower, breathe out seeing the world with new eyes. And one more time, flower, freshness. And then take the green pebble. This represents a mountain and the solidity that we can have. It's a gift to ourselves and it's a gift to others. So imagine that mountain and breathe in. You might even widen your legs like a mountain. Breathe in mountain and breathe out stability. Maybe feel as you breathe out your feet rooting into the ground. Breathe in mountain. Breathe out stability. Breathe in mountain and out stability. And then pull out the next pebble, the clear pebble. Maybe there's a pond or a lake on that mountain. You might imagine yourself sitting beside a pond or walking around a lake. Clear water reflects whatever is before it. So this is our ability to reflect the world around us as it truly is, without distortion. So breathe in calm, clear water. Breathe out, reflecting the world as it is. Breathe in clear water. Breathe out, reflecting. And then take your fourth pebble, the blue one, for the sky, the blue sky. This is the openness of possibility. That sky that could have clouds in it, or a storm, lightning and thunder, or bright sunshine, or a gentle drizzle of rain. But always behind it is that sky waiting to be filled. So we have that possibility within us as well. So breathe in sky and breathe out possibility. Breathe in sky, breathe out freedom. And one more time, breathe in sky and breathe out freedom. So you can take these pebbles with you. You can take the bag. Thich Nhat Hanh recommends having a little bag for the pebbles, so you can carry them with you and pull them out whenever you need to, and connect with these parts of ourselves which are always there, that flower of freshness, that mountain of stability, the clear reflecting water, the bright blue sky of possibility. And if you find that you need to do this meditation, you don't have the pebbles, you can just use your fingers. That's another thing you can do. So we've done this one before. Anybody remember doing this? It's good to do these meditations more than once so that you can develop them as a tool and have them on hand, as it were, whenever you need them. With a brief period of meditation, again from Thich Nhat Hanh, he suggests putting just a little smile on your face, just a hint of a smile. You might have noticed statues of Buddha often have this little upturned smile. So when we do that, it actually physiologically brightens our mood. Whether we're in a good mood or not, our body guides our mind. So make that little smile on your face. Look at your neighbor and see a little smile on their face. Oh, not many people fell for it. You guys are good. That was in honor of Herb Bartlett, whose granddaughter played a trick like that on him that was shared in the memorial yesterday. So now you hopefully have a big smile on your face. But you can always bring that small smile to your face. Try that again. And Thich Nhat Hanh is wonderful for simple, accessible entry into mindfulness. Often he says just to breathe in present moment and breathe out wonderful moment. So with that little smile on your face, breathe in present moment, breathe out wonderful moment. Oh, it feels so good. Let's just do it one more time. Breathe in present moment. Breathe out wonderful moment. We're going to go on with our reading, but I can just tell you that's what I'm going to be doing the rest of my day. I'm just going to be breathing in present moment and breathing out wonderful moment.
This reading is by Howard Thurman, and I encourage you to listen to the words very, very closely. And I think that each and every one of you will relate to this particular reading. How good it is to center down, to sit quietly and see oneself pass by. The streets of our minds seethe with endless traffic. Our spirits resound with clashings, with noisy silences, while something deep inside within hungers and thirsts for the still moment and the resting lull. With full intensity, we seek, ere the quiet passes, a fresh sense of order in our living, a direction, a strong, sure purpose that will structure our confusion and bring meaning to our chaos. We look at ourselves in this waiting moment, the kinds of people we are. The questions persist. What are we doing with our lives? What are the motives that order our days? What is the end of our doings? Where are we trying to go? Where do we put the emphasis, and where are our values focused? For what end do we make sacrifices? Where is my treasure? And what do I love the most in life? What do I hate most in life? And to what am I true? Over and over, the questions beat in upon the waiting moment. As we listen, floating up through all the jangling echoes of our turbulence, there is a sound of another kind, a deeper note which only the stillness of the heart makes clear. It moves directly to the core of our being. Our questions are answered, our spirits refreshed, and we move back into the traffic of our daily round with the peace of the eternal in our step. How good it is to center down.
How good it is to center down. Last Sunday, I talked about formal mindfulness meditation practices like sitting meditation and walking meditation, where you focus on the breath. And I shared the reason for mindfulness practices from a Buddhist perspective, which is to become a Buddha or Bodhisattva, dedicated to living your life for the benefit of all beings. Today, I'm going to talk about more informal mindfulness practices. Maybe you don't have time for that formal sitting meditation or walking meditation, or maybe you've tried it and it just doesn't work for you. So I want to give you some other tools. And these practices I'm going to share with you also could be called intermediate mindfulness practices, because I hope that they could maybe, if you do have a mindfulness practice, a formal practice, that this could be a bridge from that practice into bringing mindfulness into the everyday moments of your life. Which is perhaps, by the way, the most accessible way that we can access our mindfulness. Just noticing our hands as they button or unbutton our shirt as we put it on or take it off, or bringing our mindfulness to folding our laundry or dicing a red pepper to put on a salad, or washing dishes after the meal. Sometimes in a busy life, that's all we have time for. But I do think there's some benefits to this intermediate kind of, or informal mindfulness practice. So a different kind of sitting meditation and a different kind of walking meditation. Ministry, you may or may not have thought about this, can be a particularly challenging job, particularly in the beginning. There's some careers where the jump from learning how to do something to actually doing it, there's no substitute for the real deal. So during my first few years of congregational ministry in Tallahassee, Florida, I was so lucky to live across from an ephemeral marsh. That's just another way of describing a swamp. But a particular kind of swamp that dries up or partially dries up between rainfalls and then fills up during the rainier times of the year. So we lived on a house on stilts across from this ephemeral marsh. And during those difficult first years of ministry, sitting on that porch, up above and across from the swamp, was my most enduring and my most necessary spiritual practice. It wasn't a formal meditation practice. I didn't lower my eyes and focus on my breath, bringing my attention back to my breath when my mind had wandered. All I really did was make a regular habit of sitting on that porch. Sometimes just sitting. Sometimes I had my computer and I was writing a sermon or an email. Sometimes I had a cup of coffee. Often there were birds, egrets, white herons, great blue herons, hawks, owls, geese, and little goslings, woodpeckers. This heron on my stole is a symbol of that porch sitting. This stole was given to me when I was ordained by that congregation in Tallahassee and it's installed as their settled minister. So as I was sitting on the porch, I wasn't meditating, but I guess you could say I wasn't not meditating either. What I mean is I was engaged in that informal or intermediate kind of mindfulness practice. My breathing did slow, my body relaxed, my awareness broadened and deepened in many of the same ways that I've experienced in a formal sitting meditation practice. And yet there was something more relaxed and open about this way of doing it. And by more open, I mean in a formal meditation practice, while you might notice the sound of the birds, you'd be discouraged from actively watching a bird. You're supposed to be watching your mind. But impromptu bird watching while porch sitting, I'm here to tell you, can be a powerful mindfulness practice. You could say that instead of the object of focus being the breath, it becomes the bird, or the feeling of the breeze on your skin, or the hot, sticky, humid air, or the sight and sound of rain. It's definitely a holy thing, a sacred thing, porch sitting like this. I've even continued this practice here in Virginia, even though there isn't anything as magical as an ephemeral marsh bird sanctuary across from my porch in Richmond. There is, however, a tree. And one thing that Tallahassee doesn't have is autumn. I can't tell you how excited I was to return to a place with an autumn, where the leaves change colors and fall from the trees. At the beginning, around this time last year, I couldn't wait. I couldn't wait for fall to come. And when it did, I sat on my porch every day, usually first thing in the morning, often only for 5 to 10 minutes. And it took me to drink my first cup of coffee. And I watched that tree, witnessed it, the colors changing from day to day. A change that was both slow. I mean, I couldn't see it actually happening in the moment, but also fast because I knew it wouldn't last, that it was fading away as soon as it had begun. That kind of ephemerality heightened my awareness. You could say the natural world supported my experience of mindfulness. It's actually a name for this kind of practice, which I didn't know when I started doing it. I found out later. It's called having a sit spot. A sit spot is simply a favorite place in nature, or even looking out of a window from indoors at nature, that is visited regularly to cultivate awareness, expanding your senses, and studying the patterns of local plants, birds, trees, and animals. Now, I said I'd also talk about an informal kind of walking meditation, and I also live near a lake. So about a month and a half ago, when I had the idea for this sermon, I decided to make a practice of walking around that lake, a kind of mobile sit spot, if you will. I would walk the lake daily, or as often as possible, at roughly the same time of day and following the same pattern around the lake. Again, there were both similarities and differences from a formal Buddhist practice of walking meditation. I didn't walk slowly like you would in a Buddhist walking meditation, or match my steps to my breathing like I talked about last Sunday. Instead, I walked at a brisk pace. I was trying to get a little exercise as well as a little mindfulness practice. And I was aware not only of my thoughts, but of the world around me. And if my mind wandered, unlike in a Buddhist meditation practice, I didn't bring it back to the object of meditation. I just let it wander. The practice was just to observe my thoughts, allowing them as I walked to go wherever they wanted to, including even if I replayed the same tape over and over again, allowing a stream of thought to flow and grow over time, maybe a consistent theme and variation like that Beethoven piece, maybe shifting moods, dark and light, joyful and sorrowful in one walk around the lake. All that mattered was that I committed to walking around the lake, following the same pathway each day at roughly the same time, observing, witnessing both the landscape and the waterscape before me and the inner scape of my shifting thoughts and my meandering moods. It occurred to me that in some ways this walk around the lake resembled a labyrinth. Now, strictly speaking, it wasn't a labyrinth at all. It wasn't shaped like a labyrinth. So let me explain what I mean. A labyrinth has a series of steps. No pun intended. First, you enter the labyrinth. For me, this was the short walk from my house to the lake, which served as a gentle transition from my normal life into this temporary alternate reality. Sometimes I even allowed myself to listen to a brief section of a podcast to ease my way into the walking time. And when I arrived at the lake, I began my first circumambulation around it, walking counterclockwise. The lake on my left, like the pathway in a labyrinth that leads toward the center. Labyrinth walkers will often ask a question, walking with the question as they move toward the center of the labyrinth, seeing if an answer arises. I didn't do that exactly, but I did experience this part of the walk as a movement inward, one that did sometimes reveal new insights, and other times simply quieted my mind, calmed my nervous system, relaxed my body, as a gentle wave of endorphins began to channel through my bloodstream. Now, when I completed that clockwise circumambulation of the lake, I turned around and I walked the same path, this time walking clockwise, the lake on my right. Like the journey outward from the center of a labyrinth, this second circumambulation of the lake was often about moving out from the center, perhaps bringing whatever thought journey I'd been on towards a conclusion, or maybe just soaking up the good vibes of whatever equanimity I'd been able to achieve, knowing that it was moving towards its end and I'd be returning to my daily grind soon. Finally, I would conclude the walk and with my brief journey back home, a time for integrating back into my daily life what I'd received from the walk. I want to share two brief things about the lake. Our reading was from Howard Thurman, and he has another reading about what he calls the inward sea, and this lake actually resembles it quite a bit. Thurman wrote, "There is in every person an inward sea, and in that sea there is an island. And on that island there is an altar, and standing guard before that altar is the angel with the flaming sword." Now, I don't know if there is an altar or an angel standing guard with a flaming sword, but there is an island at the center of this lake. Sometimes the world outside of us can mirror our inner world, our inward sea. And on one of those walks around the lake, I was reminded of something I learned several months ago. Actually, when I was attending a religious education class with my daughter, put on by the First Unitarian Church of Richmond, I learned that this particular lake used to be a swimming hole. That on summer days it would be full of sunbathers lounging on towels in the grass, while swimmers waded out in the cool waters and swam across to that island in the center. I say sunbathers, swimmers, but I should clarify. I mean white sunbathers arrayed on those towels on the banks of the lake, white swimmers wading out into the cool waters and venturing across to the island. You see, it was a whites-only swimming spot. And when the civil rights movement prompted legal changes, ending the segregation of public spaces, the city shut down the lake as a swimming spot rather than allow it to be integrated. No one swims in the lake now, except the ducks and the geese. Knowing this, the summer days in Richmond feel hotter, with an unnecessary violence to the heat. A heat that comes with an unquenchable thirst, guarded not by a protective angel with a flaming sword, but by the hatred of racism rippling across the years. This kind of thing happened all over this nation. Rather than share the cool waters, white Americans chose to close them off, even when it meant closing off access for themselves and people of all races. In Montgomery, Alabama, for example, in 1959, the city council decided to drain the public pool rather than share it with their black neighbors. Oak Park Pool. In her book, The Sum of Us, What Racism Cost Everyone and How We Can Prosper Together, Heather McGee writes, "White children cried as the city contractors poured cement into the pool, paving it over. To defy desegregation, Montgomery would go on to close every single public park and padlock the doors of the community center." Then McGee uses the draining of swimming pools as a metaphor for the subsequent draining of public resources in general. She notes that survey data shows that in 1956, 65% of white people, 65% of white people believed that the government ought to guarantee a job to anyone who wanted one and provide a minimum standard of living to everyone in the country. But by 1964, less than a decade later, white support for these ideas dropped to 35% and has stayed low ever since. Since then, working class and middle class white Americans, through their voting patterns, rather than share public goods with black Americans, have instead brought about the destruction of most of our public goods programs. The result, McGee writes, was a revolution in American economic policy, from high marginal tax rates and generous public investments in the middle class, such as the GI Bill, to a low tax, low investment regime that resulted in less than 1% annual income growth for 90% of American families. for the following 30 years. Simple walk around a lake and a little follow-up research opened my eyes in new ways, bringing new understanding to what it might mean to engage in mindfulness like a bodhisattva, committed to living my life for the benefit of all beings. Now, I know it isn't easy to find the time to engage in even these kinds of informal mindfulness practices. I told you that I had this idea to walk around the lake when I had the idea for this sermon. And I was going to take a walk around that lake every day for the next month and a half. In truth, I only managed it a handful of times. And yet, what richness it brought to my life from just those handful of times, both in the nourishing quiet and calm the practice brought to my mind and my body, and also in the insights, including the one I just shared about the impact of racism and how it continues to rob people of all races of access to public goods. As Howard Thurman urges us, we need to make the time to center down. That might be by engaging in a formal meditation practice like we talked about last Sunday. It might be by engaging in the kind of more informal mindfulness practice of porch sitting or lake walking that I described this morning, or something like it. I mentioned that I haven't had much time for the lake walking and the porch sitting, so for the past 2 days, I noticed that and I thought, let me turn off the podcast and the music while I'm driving, just for part of the drive. And I was able to access that same kind of mindfulness. And it can be just about bringing mindfulness into whatever you're doing in the moment. Sitting in a sanctuary, typing on a computer keyboard, or washing the dishes at the end of a long, hard day. The need is to quiet the endless traffic of our minds, deepening our awareness of that which hungers and thirsts within us. That, to quote Howard Thurman, moves us directly to the core of our being, where our questions are answered, our spirits refreshed, and then we move back into the traffic of our daily round with the peace of the eternal in our step. How good it is to center down. How good it is to center down. Whatever mindfulness practice you're doing, if it doesn't feel good, it isn't calming and centering you like that, find a different way to do it. How good it is to center down. May it be so, and may we be among those to make it so. Amen, 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 and blessed be.
Come to this church, we go from Ludwig van Beethoven to Otis Redding. What more can you ask for? We're coming towards the end of the service, so I invite you all to stand. And if you're next to a loved one, a partner, a family member, I encourage you to join hands, just make that connection. And these are the words of David Bumbaugh. This church is dedicated to the proposition that behind all our differences and beneath all our diversity, there is a unity that makes us one and binds us forever together in spite of time, death, and the space between the stars. We pause now in silent witness to that unity.
For our closing words, I just want to remind you to take the time to center down and bring that little smile to your face.